It's that time of the week again, behind enemy lines. And this one, much like Eagles week, is now the new precedence as far as behind enemy lines. This is the one that I'm the most excited for multiple reasons. My son is a Ravens fan, even though I'm a 49er fan. I think that makes it a lot of fun. And these are the two best teams in their respected conferences. This one on Christmas night should be a doozy. I've got somebody with me from the Ravens side of things, and we're going to talk about this matchup, and we're going to do it next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And as I said, it's a behind enemy lines Ravens edition. And meeting me tonight is Noah from For the Flock. Awesome YouTube channel. You've got like 30 plus, 40,000 subscribers, whatever it is. You're absolutely killing it, brother. Love the background. Love the news that you bring to your community. So happy to have you on tonight. How you doing?
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you reaching out and making this thing happen. I'm excited for this matchup. Like I was telling you before the show, I got a chance to watch you and your son's interview. For all the guys that are watching on my side, because we're doing the dual stream here, Jesse's son is actually a Ravens fan. So this is awesome. He knows a lot about the Ravens, and we got an absolute heavyweight matchup. I mean, how much of a treat is it that we get to watch the number one seed from both conferences play on Christmas night, man? I'm fired up for this one.
It doesn't get better than this. And I got to say, you know, unfortunately for my son, he wasn't around for these, but I remember some of those primetime matchups that the 49ers have lost to the Ravens. The Thanksgiving night, obviously, we know the Super Bowl. Hopefully the 49ers can get this one back. Feel really good about their chances. We'll get to predictions later, but first, we do have to talk about injuries, and I think there are some injuries on both sides of the ball, Noah, that are significant. We know that Andrews has been out for a couple weeks. That was a huge loss when it happened. It's still a huge loss. Yes. Isaiah Likely has been fantastic, though. He's filled in very, very nicely. But one thing that scared me about the Ravens was Mitchell. He was something different for this team. He was explosive. He came in mid-season and just injected life into that running game, added an extra layer of explosiveness to Lamar Jackson and some of the things they have going on. And he went down with a torn ACL this last week. I know that was huge. You have a couple injuries on the offensive line. Why don't we first start with Mitchell? Tell me how that's going to impact things when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens and what they've been doing.
Yes, absolutely. There's no sugarcoating the fact that Keaton Mitchell, losing him for the year, you saw it was a pretty brutal injury. You know, that's a gut shot. I mean, it's a huge loss for the Ravens because he was a legitimate another aspect of the offense that play in and play out defenses had to worry about. Like this guy could legitimately break one off for 20, 30, 40, 50 yards. He could take it all the way to the house because he has that legitimate 4.2, 4.3 speed. This was a guy that, you know, Ravens fans were raving about. You know, I went to some of the training camp practices and the speed popped right off. I mean, he was something special. And this is a guy that had been waiting for his opportunity. His dad actually is a former Baltimore Raven. So kind of had the bloodline there. And man, we were really excited about Keaton, and he was really starting to bring that element to the offense that we knew that he could. And so it sucked because, you know, it's just another weapon that defenses have to worry about. They do have some competent backs behind Mitchell. Gus Edwards has been in this position before where he's had to carry a workload, and he does tend to wear on defenses. He's a big, 235-pound rocked up back. And then Justice Hill has some speed as well. He's not Keaton Mitchell fast, but he's still fast. And then the Ravens are actually bringing up Melvin Gordon from their practice squad to the active roster. He showed some juice and limited action this year. He had a couple of call-ups from the practice squad and looks good in that limited action. But there's no sugarcoating. There's no denying the fact that losing Keaton Mitchell is a huge blow.
Yeah, it is massive. And you talked about all three of those running backs. The Ravens will play all three. They will deploy them all. Your fantasy team aside, they do not care. So I expect to see all three of
Nope.
them carry the ball. I really liked Edwards in that role, is like the third and short back, the goal line back, the spell back. I thought that was the best place for him to be. And that's ideal. Obviously,
Yeah.
Dobbins has been there the last couple of years. He continuously gets injured. So Edwards can just gets thrust into starting action. But
Yep.
when Mitchell came back, it was like, okay, we can get everybody back into their right roles. We can get everybody going exactly where we need them to go. And then Mitchell going down was a huge loss. And there was a run by Mitchell last week that just showed his explosiveness, where they
Yeah.
handed it off to him. He started to run right, was dead to rights, ran all the way back to the other side
Yeah.
and picked up 20. It was like, oh gosh, this is scary with him and Lamar back there at the mesh point. And just like that, it was over. So
Anytime he touched the ball, he was a threat to break it outside. And in fact, some of the coaches told him like, "Hey, man, you don't have to bounce it out every single time." But he did do it good with his speed. So, yeah, it's a big loss for sure.
yeah, most definitely. What about some of these other injuries? I know that Ronnie Stanley had a
Yes.
concussion.
So Ronnie
Morgan
Stanley,
Moses also is hurt, I believe.
yep.
So talk me through those things.
Ronnie Stanley, he had a concussion. He did return to practice today.
Okay.
Not sure if he's actually cleared the protocol. I think he's still in protocol, but did return to practice. Marcus Williams is a huge part of the defense. A really rangy safety who's good in coverage, can come up and tackle. He's been dealing with a pec injury throughout the year. He's kind of worked through that, but he had a groin injury on a goal line stop against the Jaguars. But he actually returned to practice today as well. So the Ravens are relatively healthy. Besides the fact that, we lost Mark Andrews maybe for the year, Keaton Mitchell for the year, J.K. Dobbins for the year. But like compared to most teams, the Ravens, this is like one of the healthier Ravens teams I've seen in recent years. The bad news for the Ravens is that Odell Beckham Jr. and Zay Flowers did not practice today. You're talking about the number 1 and number 2 receiving options there in Odell and Zay Flowers. Odell, he kind of walked gingerly off of the field against the Jaguars. He was seen kind of working something out with the massage gun. He did not practice, but it's also not been uncommon for him to have a vet day, a rest day early in the week. Zay Flowers, he was seen wearing a walking boot after the game. So that was big time concern. But John Harbaugh did clear it up today that it was just precautionary, that he is dealing with some type of bruise, and that he should be good to go. He said there's no major concern for Zay Flowers, but that kind of, we'll wait and see on that one, see if he returns to practice at all throughout the week, because Zay Flowers, not having him on the field, you're talking about losing another explosive, aspect to the offense there.
You know what's interesting about Harbaugh? At least this is what I kind of noticed over the years. Some coaches are pessimistic when it comes to injuries. Some coaches don't like to talk about injuries at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of the few, if not the only one that I can think of, that's very optimistic when it comes to injuries.
Yes.
I swear everybody's like day to day. It's like Lamar last year was day to day for 6
Yep.
weeks going into the playoffs, and then he just never played.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, he's
I don't know how much I trust Harbaugh when it comes to these injury report things.
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes he's dangerously, annoyingly optimistic. I remember one year, our top receiver went down. He was like, "Yeah, a couple days," and then it was like, "Oh, a couple weeks," and we never saw him the whole year. Like, it just sometimes he's really optimistic. But in this case, I think Zay Flowers is okay. I think there would have been some type of reports leaked out if he wasn't, but we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, are you of the belief that Andrews has a shot if they make it to a Super Bowl? It sounds like a lot of Ravens fans have talked about that. The Ravens themselves, we just talked about Harbaugh and his optimism. He's leaving things open. That's why Ertz was not an option. But do you think that there's a shot from what you're hearing?
I do. I do think there's a shot. Isaiah Likely has been talking to Mark, and he said that he's been working hard, and if there's any chance that he can return, he's going to, because he's that type of guy. Mark Andrews is just, he's obsessed with football. He's no one works harder than Mark Andrews on the Ravens, and he's going to be putting everything he can to try to get back out there. We'll see if he's cleared. So I'm not rolling it out. I don't really I'm not necessarily saying I'm confident that it'll come back, but I'm not rolling it out either. How are the 49ers, for all the viewers on my side of things, how are they looking with injuries?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 49ers are relatively healthy. The
Mhm.
one major player that we've lost for the year is Talanoa Hufanga, but
Okay.
Jair Brown has filled in very admirably. He was a third
Mhm.
round rookie out of Penn State. He's done a fantastic job. He might be
Mhm.
playing better than Talanoa, who was an all pro last year, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So he's playing very, very good football. They came out of this last game. Well, they entered the game, I should say, with a couple injuries on the defensive line. Eric
Mhm.
Armstead, starting defensive tackle. Javon
Mhm.
Hargrave, starting defensive tackle. Neither of them played last week. Both of them are truly questionable this week. Armstead is dealing with foot and knee issues. He's sat out for the last 2 weeks. I believe he probably has more of a chance to play, at least at this moment, because they said it was a 1 to 2 week injury. This is now
Mhm.
week 3. I hope that he's back. But Hargrave has a hamstring tweak that happened 2 weeks ago, kept him out this week, and that might keep him out again this week. So those are the major injuries. They did also have Diamador Lenore go down with an injury, starting corner for the 49ers. It was more of a rib bruise. He should be fine.
Okay.
So
Okay.
outside of those defensive tackles, there's not a ton that we're looking at from an injury report for the 49ers.
Good. Yeah, I definitely want to see both of these teams, going at it full strength, man, for sure. So that's good to hear that both of these teams are relatively healthy.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's get to some of these super chats real quick. Brother Bob says, Noah, you know the Niners don't lose to birds. It's just the facts.
He doesn't remember the Super Bowl, does he?
Don't
Or
tell
the
him.
last matchup.
Samir says, if you do a hat bet, I don't know that that's going to happen. So Noah, this has kind of become not a trend, but
Okay.
the Eagles and the Dallas Cowboy content creators were
Mhm.
feeling very froggy. And so we made some hat bets. And luckily the 49ers came out on top. So those guys had to pay up on wearing 49er hats on their streams. I'm not feeling that coming along on this one, and no need for it. I'm fine there. He says, if you do a hat bet, please make sure the terms are clear. Them birds get elusive when it's time to pay the piper. I'm just kidding, Noah. All right. Very
Nice one,
nice of you,
Samir.
Samir. Here's a fantasy question. I don't know. Do you play fantasy football at all?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. All right. Here's a good one. And I think this is a legit question. He's in the playoffs, obviously. He says, start Kittle or Likely. This is actually a close one for me. I don't.
Look, I got a lot of respect for Kittle. I think he's a dog. I love what he does as a blocker, especially.
Mhm.
Like, there's no doubt in the fact that he's a top 3 tight end. Okay. But I will say for this matchup and fantasy purposes, I know I'm a little biased. I'd roll with Isaiah Likely. First of all, um, so we were talking about the injuries and with Mark Andrews and everything. Isaiah Likely, since he's actually been a starter, the last 3 games since Mark Andrews has gone down, he's averaged over 60 yards per game, which is actually more than what Mark Andrews averaged, about 54 yards per game. So
Mm,
he's averaging about the same amount of receptions as Mark Andrews, but he's getting a little bit more explosion. I'm not saying that Isaiah Likely is better than Mark, but
no.
I will say Isaiah Likely has been just waiting for his opportunity. It's hard for him to get consistent playing time with Todd Monken's offense with 2 tight end sets. With Greg Roman's offense, keep in mind, we had a different coordinator last year. He used a lot of 21 personnel, 12, getting 2 tight ends on the field. Um, Todd Monken hasn't necessarily been, running those sets as much, getting Isaiah Likely to Mark on the field at the same time. So as soon as Isaiah got his shot, I mean, you're seeing him produce. He's super athletic. He can run after catch. He can get open deep. He's shifty. He's got a huge catch radius. I don't know if you guys saw that catch against the Jags, just mossed the 2
Yes.
defenders. So, and him and Lamar are building a nice chemistry. So would not sleep on Isaiah Likely in this game. And I think he's one of Lamar's targets right now. So, and to answer your question, I'm sorry, I know I'm ranting here with Kittle. He's probably going to see a lot of Kyle Hamilton, and Kyle Hamilton has really been a tight end eraser. I mean, he can cover, slot receivers. He can cover big tight ends, and he's seen a lot of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely in practice. So I'm not saying that Kittle won't have success and won't have his catches, But as Kyle Hamilton's really good at covering tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: I've got Kittle and Laporta, and I'm comfortably starting Laporta this week in a money league.
Yeah, I got
Now,
Laporta as well.
likely is not Laporta, and I don't think that either of us are making the argument that likely is on Kittle's level as far as a player. However, fantasy
Right.
football wise, I'm going with likely as well. This is a position that Lamar Jackson is traditionally targeted. The reason that likely is putting up numbers that are even slightly better than Andrews is because Andrews was constantly the focus of defenses. Likely is not going to get that same attention. And now
Mhm.
that allows Lamar Jackson to comfortably go to his tight end. So I expect that he'll get at least 7, 8 targets this week, probably at least 5 catches.
Yeah.
And Kittle can go crazy, but he can also get 2 targets. You just don't know with Kittle and what the game plan is. And the Ravens are one of the better teams against the tight end, fantasy football wise. So I would go with likely as well. I actually agree with you
Mhm.
here. Brother Bob says OBJ and Zay suck anyway, so you're not missing much. I disagree there, man. Zay Flowers is I love Zay Flowers, and OBJ is rounding into form. I would say right before the bye week. I think it was the game before the bye week. Maybe it was 2 games before the bye week. Started
Mhm.
to realize I'm like, oh, OBJ looks like OBJ again. He's starting
Yeah.
to separate again. He's starting to run crisp routes. He's looking a lot better than he did early in the season.
Yeah. He had a setback late in training camp. Like I said, I was at training camp and he looked really explosive during the practices. Like he was getting open deep against guys like
Mhm.
Marlon Humphrey. And I was like, man, his legs were real, jacked up and he looked good. Um, he did have an ankle injury early in the season that really slowed him down. And he didn't have that initial burst. He did get better from that. And then you're seeing, I mean, this is the reason, like the Ravens signed Odell Beckham Jr. for December and January football. Later down the stretch when Lamar Jackson needs a veteran target that, he can trust. And Odell typically shows up in prime time. He shows up when the lights are brightest. So he has definitely improved. It was looking a little bit not so great earlier in the season. I was like, man, I don't know. Like, at the time, Nelson Aguilar was producing more than Odell. But last 5 games, he's had a game with 97 yards and a touchdown, a game over 100 yards, caught a slant, took it to the house against the
Yeah.
Browns. So, Odell's starting to pick up some steam.
Yeah, he's looking good. He's looking really good. Matt says, seeing how Lamar can't throw to himself, we should we should be good. Yeah, that would be scary if there was a Lamar Jackson at receiver. Brother
Yeah.
Bob says, stop living in the past, Noah. The flood is coming. This is in reference to your comment about winning the last few games.
We'll
Sammy and a
see. It'll
pickle.
be a good one, man.
Yeah. Sammy and a pickle says, after dealing with the Eagles fans BS, the Ravens fans are a breath of fresh air. Ish talking is fun again. Yeah, absolutely. It is all fun. And that Eagles game, there was a lot there to unpack from the NFC Championship. So, those were old wounds. Dave Barclay says, what up, Jess? Noah? Brother Bob must have forgot last year we only lost to birds. Anyways, I think this is a Super Bowl preview, and I've said it since week 4. This is the game I've been waiting for. Keep up the good work, fellas. Dave, thank you so much. And
Appreciate
right
it, Dave.
now, it definitely looks like it's trending to being if you had to make a Super Bowl prediction right now, Noah, would this be it, or would you go elsewhere?
Absolutely. I mean, I look at the NFC and I think the 49ers are clearly the best team in the NFC. At first, I was looking at the Eagles, I was
Mhm.
like, they had a pretty good defense, their offense is explosive. They got weapons, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, DeAndre Swift, a strong offensive line, but then I don't know what's going on with their pass defense. Like I look at
Awful.
James Bradbury and Darius Slay, and I'm like, how is your pass defense this bad that you have talented corners, but they're just, and then their defensive line, like, how are you not producing more pass rush with guys like Hassan Reddick and, who's the rookie they have that they got 6th overall?
Jordan Davis.
They have Davis, and then they had another guy that they got in this year's draft. I forget his name, but he's
Oh,
um,
yeah, from Georgia. Yeah.
from
Yeah,
Georgia. Yeah, they got the 2
yeah,
Georgia boys, but
yeah.
looking at their like they're just underperforming. So, and the Cowboys, I don't trust the Cowboys, especially when they're on the road. They don't play as well. So, in my opinion, I think the Niners are the best team. I saw Detroit; they look like they might have been in the mix, but the Ravens smoked the Lions, and that's why I think this game is going to be so good because I think it's really a measuring stick. Because if you look around the league, there's not many better teams. I don't think there's any better teams right now than the Ravens and the Niners. So you're talking about the best competition that you can give each other to see where you're at. You know what I mean? Like you can only see so much on how good your team is against average teams, but these are two legitimately good teams. I mean, I'm looking at top overall. So like right now, the Baltimore Ravens have the first overall defense, 16.1 points per game allowed. The Niners
Mhm.
have the second at 16.7. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about the number one and number two defenses going head to head. And then we're talking about the offenses in points per game. The Niners had the third at 30.4 points per game. And the Ravens had the fourth at 27.4. So you're talking about the number one and number two overall defense and number three, number four offense with playmakers all over the field. And three of the top five right now, according to odds for MVP, you got three of these players in that game: Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, and Lamar Jackson. So not much of you can't have a better test than this.
Yeah, the chat coming through in the clutch. Jalen Carter was the name we were looking for.
Jalen Carter
from the Eagles.
Yes.
Brother Bob says likely over Kittle. Baltimore must have good. Listen, it's fantasy football. Brother Bob, you may not play fantasy football, but that is very different than who's the better tight end. All right.
Got to play the matchups.
Jason says, do y'all think the MVP race is done after this game? I do. I do. I think that the MVP race will be done after this game. It'll be pretty much decided. It is down to essentially Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson, and the winner, I think, will be the front runner for the MVP. So, barring a 2-game collapse down the stretch from either team, which I don't see happening, I think that it'll be over. And this actually parlays beautifully into the next topic.
Yep.
Where we're going to talk a little bit about the quarterbacks, but we're going to do something a little bit different because I've watched your shows, Noah, and I've heard you talk very glowingly about Brock Purdy. I have only positive things to say about Lamar. So I'll let you go first. Tell me what you like about Brock Purdy, what you've seen from him this year.
What I like most about Brock Purdy is he's just stoic. Like he doesn't seem to get rattled, doesn't seem to get shaken. And even watching him last year, he was a rookie last year, right? I'm looking at him and I'm like, this guy just looks too confident. Like he just doesn't, he shouldn't be this calm in the pocket as a rookie. So that's my biggest, like what I'm most impressed with him. But then he's also accurate. You're just talking about pinpoint, deadly accurate, putting the ball exactly where it needs to be. He's got great touch. Some of the system, the scheme that the 49ers run, he's able to just beautifully layer the ball over linebackers off of play action, kind of thread it in between like the different layers of the defense. So I love his touch, his accuracy, and then he just doesn't seem to get rattled. And the Ravens defense really lives off of that, getting quarterbacks uncomfortable, like hitting quarterbacks, even if they're not getting sacks, just like being aggressive, hitting the quarterback, getting them rattled, giving them different looks, getting them confused. So, that could be a really key matchup to see if, he gets rattled at all. I don't know if he will, but looking at his numbers, over 3,700 passing yards, second in the NFL. Yeah. What's really impressive here too, 9.9 yards per throw. That's good for first in the NFL. And then the best passer rating at 119. So, I mean, Brock Purdy, he's balling. I know there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, he's got all these weapons, but what else do you want him to do besides put the ball in the perfect spot for the weapons to go get the ball, run after catch? That's really where he's made a lot of his money. People say, well, he's got Deebo Samuel breaking all these tackles and yards after catch and C-Mac and Ayuk and all this stuff, George Kittle. But the placement of the ball where he's hitting his receivers and tight ends in stride and C-Mac, allowing them to run after catch shouldn't go overlooked either. And Kyle Hamilton was asked about Brock Purdy today. And he said, quote, "The word around the league is that he's a system quarterback. But from what I've seen, that's just not true." So from Kyle Hamilton himself saying, no, he's not just a system quarterback. He's playing excellent football. So I think it's going to be a really tough test for the Ravens defense. But I will say the Ravens defense on the road has been very good this year. They only have allowed 14.4 points per game on the road, 270 yards allowed total on the road, and they've been 6-1. So for whatever reason, the Ravens defense shows up on the road. So it'll be a really good matchup. I think Brock Purdy's playing really good football.
Yeah, this is going to be a fantastic matchup. I'll return the favor and I'll talk a little bit about Lamar Jackson. We know what Lamar brings from a running aspect. I think everybody knows what Lamar brings from a running aspect. He's the most dynamic quarterback in the NFL, the most dynamic quarterback that we've had in this league since Michael Vick. He's absolutely incredible. There are other quarterbacks that can run, but nobody does it like him. The way that he can get shifty, change speeds, he's one of one in the NFL as a runner. But people that don't watch Lamar regularly think that we're still dealing with Lamar from 2 years ago, or maybe even longer. They can't get over the fact that the last time that they watched him as a passer, he wasn't doing the things that he's doing now. Lamar Jackson has improved in every aspect as a passer. When you look at him now and he gets pressured, he doesn't put his eyes down and take off looking to run. He keeps his eyes downfield and tries to stay at or behind the line of scrimmage for as long as possible before he bails. That is a change in his game. His accuracy has gone up since he's been in the NFL. His touch has improved a ton. And quite frankly, I got to say this too. It's interesting that his touch has improved because I think his arm strength has improved. When Lamar Jackson first came in the league, we knew that he could throw the ball far. But as far as velocity goes, I would have never put him in the upper echelon of quarterbacks as far as velocity. I think he's starting to creep up there, man. The velocity on his arm is really improved over the last few years from what I've seen. Lamar Jackson has improved in every facet of the game when it comes to passing. He's a student of the game. He works his butt off. And man, Lamar Jackson, who won an MVP a couple years ago, put up magnificent numbers. I think he's the best that he's ever been this year. And that's saying a lot about a former unanimous MVP. So
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say, and I 100% agree with you that he's playing better this year than he did in 2019 when he won the MVP. Some people are saying that maybe he slowed down a little bit. I don't know. He's added a few pounds to his frame. I'll say that. And the one thing you're talking about with some of the arm velocity, kind of able to rip some of those outside throws. I think his spiral is tighter from whenever he first came into the league, which helps a lot. And then the way he uses his hips to drive the ball on the outside has improved as well. So, and the other thing is, this is really the only year we've seen Lamar Jackson with at least average to above average receiving core. And he has a different offensive coordinator. So, I mean, if you look at years past, in 2019, when Lamar won the MVP, and the Ravens were 14-2, winning 12 straight. And, Lamar Jackson threw 36 touchdowns to only like 6 interceptions. He was throwing to guys like Willie Snead. I think is Willie Snead on the Niners now? The practice squad?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is.
I think he is. But Willie Snead, like Miles Boykin, rookie Marquise Brown, who was coming off an injury, like he's never really had receivers like this and a scheme that allowed him to make checks and be a passing friendly scheme. So this is why you're seeing like kind of the development of Lamar Jackson. We already knew that he was talented as a passer, but was never really given the keys to truly thrive in that manner. So it's definitely refreshing to see change in scenery with receivers and new offensive coordinator.
Well, and a couple more things that I want to point out is the year that he won the MVP. I think right now, I was looking at it the other day, so it's close. His passing yards and his attempts are basically dead even through 14 games of what he had as MVP year. So he's throwing a little bit more, but also you talked about what Hamilton said. I don't have the direct quote in front of me, But
Mhm.
the 49ers have not been shy about telling you how they feel about opposing quarterbacks this year. When they went to play the Eagles, the way that Shanahan and Nick Bosa talked about Jalen Hurts, they do not respect Jalen Hurts as a passer at all. They're like,
Really?
listen, we're gonna sit back, we're gonna keep him in the pocket, we're not gonna get out of our lanes, and we're gonna force him to throw. And they did. They didn't move upfield at all. They didn't even attempt to attack him for most of that game. They just made him a passer and he couldn't do it. Then
Mhm.
when it came to playing Kyler last week, they had good things to say about him as a passer. This week, Shanahan talked about Lamar and how impressed he was with his game and his improvement. And
Yep.
when Debo Samuel was asked about him, the smile on his face, the way he lit up, told you all you needed to know. If you didn't hear the words and you just saw his reaction, you would know that he thinks so highly of Lamar Jackson and respects the hell out of everything he's doing. So the 49ers definitely respect Lamar Jackson as they should, but they are not shy if they do not respect a quarterback. They absolutely do respect Lamar Jackson.
Awesome. Yeah, I was surprised to hear you say that. I thought you were gonna be like, "Yeah," and they said that Hurts, they liked him, they was really talented, but once you you
No,
were like, "No, they do
no,
not respect him as a passer,"
no.
so that's funny.
And that was going into the game. They didn't respect, so obviously he's fallen off the last couple weeks and everybody's starting to talk about it. But the 49ers believe that going into that game. So I thought that
Yeah.
was an interesting twist there. Frank Tom Ocean says, "You guys rock. Thank you both. I need Ayuk and likely to pop off this game." I think they might. 1 week closer to my fantasy championship. Let's go, Niners. Thanks again. Appreciate you. Steve M says, "How did the Rams keep it close to the Ravens?" Let's talk about this.
Mhm.
I'll give my opinion and then you let me know if you agree with me. First of all, the Rams kept it close with the 49ers through a big chunk of that game as well. And that was a Rams team with Puka Nacua being very new to the NFL as a rookie and no Cooper Cup.
Mhm.
So if you add Cooper Cup, it stands to reason that maybe Matthew Stafford with Nacua and Cup and Kyron Williams back can do some damage offensively. I think that's number one. Number two, Hamilton missed a big portion of that game. And
Yeah.
Hamilton really is the difference maker when it comes to that secondary and their pass defense. If you look at
Yeah.
the yards gained per play when Hamilton was in that game versus when he was out, night and day difference.
Yeah, it was
Hamilton
like
is that big
double.
of a difference for that defense. So those are the two reasons why, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. Especially, first of all, it was kind of a weird game. It was raining.
Mhm.
I think Marlon Humphrey was his first game back, and he slipped a
Yep.
couple of times and gave up some big plays. But there was like a stat that I saw that when there was like 3 games this year where Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Cup were all healthy on the field at the same time, and they were averaging over 30 points per game and like 450 yards of offense. So when those 3 guys, 4 guys, when they're on the field together, they're a really good offense. I mean, we're talking about Puka, who should win Offensive Rookie of the Year. You're talking about Cooper Cup, who's been doing it at a high level for a long time, Kyron Williams. And then, to be quite frank, in that game, like Matthew Stafford was making in some phenomenal throws, like just perfect on the money throws. That, there was a couple of times where we brought pressure and he had to make a split second decision, and he was putting the ball on the money. So in that game, I just had to give props to Matthew Stafford for playing an excellent football game. He was not rattled by the blitz, and his playmakers showed up and made plays. So that, and it was raining. We got gashed a little bit on the ground. It was Marlon Humphrey's first game back. The Ravens were still able to come out of there with a win, but Roquan Smith in the defense said, that's not our standard of football, playing, giving up that many points. So it was kind of a one-off game. We haven't really had a defensive performance like that all year, but that was against some really good weapons and really a red hot Matthew Stafford. I think when all those guys are in a lineup, they're one of the better offenses in the NFL. They just
Oh, I
haven't
agree.
been in the lineup together very often.
Oh, I agree. And in fact, if the Eagles get the number 2 seed, this has been my talk this week. If the Eagles get the number 2 seed and they're the 7th seed, I'm picking the Rams to upset the Eagles in round one.
Yeah,
That's how
that
much I
wouldn't
believe in
surprise
them
me.
right now.
Yeah.
Randall says Hamilton can't cover everyone, Jesse. He gets shut down. He can shut down one player. Let's be real. No, he can't. But the statistics showed you that in that game that their yards gained per play were literally double when Hamilton was out. He is a difference maker. It's that big of a deal because what Hamilton brings, and here's how he can shut down on everyone on defense, by the way, is when he blitzes. He's a fantastic blitzer. And if you send him off the edge and you get him in the face of Stafford, well, that shuts down everything that's going on. The moment that he's not able to play, the whole defense changes. He's the key cog right now. There's a lot of good players over there, but Hamilton is the key cog on that defense. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot can change when Hamilton's not in there, and the statistics prove that that was the case. So,
Yeah. I think Randall, that's kind of a perfect statement for our next portion of the show with the under the radar, because
yeah, let's get
says
into it.
Kyle, he says Hamilton can't cover everyone, but one of my under the radar guys that's not getting a lot of love nationally. Maybe if you're a Niners fan, you don't even know who this guy is. You've never heard of him, but the cornerback one for the Baltimore Ravens this year, whenever Marlon Humphrey has been out, and he's missed a good amount of games, has been Brandon Stevens. Brandon Stevens, I think this is his third year in the NFL. He came out of college. You know, he was originally a running back, converted to corner. Then the Ravens tried to make him a safety. And then we had some corner injuries, and they're like, no, you're going back to corner. So this was a fringe roster guy that all of a sudden it clicked for him. And because he was switching around all kinds of different positions, he finally got some continuity, some traction under his feet at the corner position. And he had all the physical tools. I mean, he's 6'1", 215 pounds. Brandon Stevens, he's been playing really good football. I mean, he's been going toe to toe with some number one receivers in this league. In fact, you know, he had a lot of press man on Jamar Chase. And I think everyone here can agree that Jamar Chase is a top 5, top 10 receiver in the National Football League. Jamar Chase had 31 yards in that game. And he was in the hip pocket, frustrating Jamar Chase all game because of his physical play style. Jamar Chase, he's a physical freak. He's strong. He's fast. And Brandon Stevens was going toe-to-toe with him. So I do think this is an under-the-radar guy here in Brandon Stevens that could, you know, cover some of these 49ers receivers who I think are very talented, very physical. I think Ayuk and Debo are excellent. You know, I got to tell you, man, I was a huge proponent for drafting Debo when he was coming out of the draft that year. I wanted Debo so bad. And I remember that was when Lamar was pretty young in his career. I was like, man, get Lamar Debo. Imagine what he would do with him, you know, because Lamar loves throwing over the middle of the field, and Debo thrives over the middle of the field with yards after catch. So I'm a huge Debo guy. Don't get me wrong. But Brandon Stevens is a type of corner that can match that type of physicality where he's just not going to roll over and let a receiver, you know, big boy him.
Yeah, absolutely. Debo, there was a chance that Debo was going to get traded a couple off seasons back, and the Ravens were in the conversation.
I remember
that would have been a cheat code. Lamar and Debo in the backfield together at the mesh point would have been it would have been so fun to watch as a football fan, and then agony for 49er fans if that actually ended up happening. I'm also going to go with a corner, and I've the two guys I'm going to go with. I've actually already mentioned their name, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with them. And I would think that most people don't know about these players either. Deommodore Lenoir, cornerback number 2. This is a player who was drafted a couple years ago, 5th round out of Oregon, and he has just developed physically so much over the last couple of seasons where he can play the nickel position. He can play outside. He can play man. He can play zone. He can press you. He looks a little bit undersized, but he plays very, very big physically. Deommodore Lenoir is a big reason that this defense is as legit as it is. And I will say this, as a Niner fan, the secondary has been a question mark. As great as the defenses have been, the defense that played you guys in the Super Bowl, secondary was a question mark, and it was through those Harbaugh years. As great as the defense has been up to this point, the secondary has been a question mark. He has been a big reason why this secondary has turned the corner, and he started out the season playing outside as the number 2 corner, and then as of late, He's kicked back inside as the nickel corner. He can do both, and he will throughout the game. But that versatility is a big reason why this defense is humming the way that it is. Big, big, big piece of this defense. An under known player across the NFL, but to us, we absolutely love and respect Demo Lenore, as we call him.
Okay. I was really intrigued to hear about that because I was actually curious. I was looking at some of these matchups and I was like, man, where can the Ravens find a matchup they like on offense whenever the Ravens
Mhm.
offense is lining up versus the Niners defense? And I was looking at the linebackers. I'm like, man, this is a really good linebacker duo.
Yeah,
We're not, they have a really good run defense. Then I was looking at, you don't want to throw at Ward. Javarius Ward is an excellent corner. And then I was like, well, maybe the safeties could be I don't know, but then I was like, maybe cornerback too. And then now you're talking about cornerback too, and I'm getting a little nervous. So I
he's
do think,
good.
yeah, I do think that kind of looking at the big picture of this game, these are two really good defenses. And I don't think this is going to be a super high scoring affair. I think both of these offenses could find themselves struggling a little bit, to consistently move the ball. But well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a fight fan, but sometimes what's interesting is in fights you get two guys that prefer to wrestle and they cancel each other out and then all of a sudden they just turn into punchers and it ends up being a knockout. Like how the hell did
Yeah.
that happen? We thought it'd be a wrestling match. Maybe it is, or maybe both defenses are so good, but both offenses come through in this game because they're also
Yeah.
good, and then they light up the score. I could see either scenario here. I really could. I think this is going to
Yeah.
be great. Do you have any other under the radar players that come to mind?
We kind of mentioned Isaiah Likely a little bit. He was one of the
Mhm.
guys that I think he just, like I was saying, he just needed an opportunity. Now that he's got the opportunity, I think he's going to continue to really shine for these Baltimore Ravens. I don't
Can
know
you
how many.
actually? Here's one that I got, and
Yeah.
you guys know about him, but there
Hmm.
aren't many, and we have one as well. We covet the fullback position. Talk
Yeah.
to me about Ricard here because he's an interesting story, and he's the exact opposite of what Kyle Juszczyk is here.
Yeah.
He is a lot of fun to watch. Talk to me a little bit about his journey.
Yeah. So Kyle Juszczyk, the former Baltimore Raven, it was
Yeah. Yep.
sad to see him go, but the Ravens have done an excellent job with the fullback position in general. Ricard actually was, brought in as a defensive tackle, and he actually had some success, in preseason when he was lining. He was kind of playing both ways for a little bit. And then eventually the offensive staff was like, bro, you need to come over to the offense full time because for being a defensive tackle with how just strong and imposing he was also a really underrated athlete. He can move as well. So he eventually kind of made a name for himself in the 2019 season whenever the Baltimore Ravens had the historic, literally the best rushing attack in NFL history that year. Patrick Ricard was a huge part of that. Now, he continued to play with the Baltimore Ravens, and whenever we switched the offensive coordinator, there was a question. There was a lot of Ravens fans that were like, is he even going to make the team? Are we even going to use a fullback? And we were like, yes, the Ravens are still going to use a fullback. And you're seeing with Todd Monken, it took him a little bit to kind of figure out how to use him, but he still gets out there and puts his nose right in the middle of things and just gets dirty, gets nasty. He's the tone setter, I'd like to say, of the offense. Whenever things start to get a little hairy in a game, maybe the offense is struggling to move the ball. Um, Sometimes we'll just mess around and be like, let's just throw a little fullback screen. Let's like seriously, like I've seen Patrick Ricard catch a little dump off and just rumble downhill and smash some guys. And then of course, sometimes we'll just say, let's run power over and over again, power right, power left, and use Patrick Ricard as just a bully in the running game. So yeah, Patrick Ricard, not a necessarily huge popular guy. The fullback has kind of been diminishing in the NFL, but he's a guy that still, and he's also a guy, I will say this too. Whenever the Ravens sometimes struggle to slow down some pass rushers, they will purposely bring Patrick Ricard in motion and kind of soften them up in the first couple of
Mm.
plays in games I've seen where they make them think about rushing on the outside. Like, hey, I'm going to bring Patrick Ricard a couple of times and kind of soften these guys up. And he's a big part of pass protection. He's huge in short yardage situations, especially when you get him and Gus Edwards rolling downhill. The Ravens offense is really hard to stop in those, third and short, fourth and short situations with the card. So yeah, he's not as athletic as a Juszczyk.
How much does he
I
weigh? He's a big boy.
think he's
a
like
big boy.
315. He
It's like
has
an
this,
offensive guard coming at you.
yes, he literally, I kid you not, like I'm not even kidding. The Baltimore Ravens had him working out in the offensive line this year. That's how big and strong he is. And like I said, he was a former defensive tackle, converted to fullback, and then late he came off an injury and they were working him in. This is where a lot of the questions came. Does he even have a role with the Baltimore Ravens offense? Because he started to work out with the offensive line. Like he legitimately could play guard. So he's that type of size. He's got that type of size.
It's absolutely incredible. I've got one more for you. Jair Brown, and I mentioned him earlier, filling in for Talanoa Hufanga. Now, Talanoa Hufanga's season ended against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers about 5 weeks ago.
Okay.
And there was some concern. Jair Brown hadn't played a lot this year. He's a rookie. First pick that they made this year. They traded up for him, a third-round pick. And he has just been fantastic. He has 2 interceptions, should be 3. Fred Warner stole one from him last week. 2 interceptions, 4 passes defensed in 4 starts. He has been a breath of fresh air. And really, just future-wise, what he allows the 49ers to do is significant because for us, there was some redundancy with Talanoa Hufanga and Gibson, where neither one of them you would necessarily want to be a single high safety because they just weren't as rangy as you would like them to be. Yeah. Jair Brown has brought that. He is able to be a over-the-top safety by himself, cover sideline to sideline. He's not the fastest guy as far as 40 goes, but his instincts and his ability to read a situation, he flies around and makes plays. So Jair Brown's another name to look out for in that secondary.
Yeah, I think that'll be really interesting. I'm curious, like one thing I really wanted to ask you, if you're, looking at your own defense, where would you want to attack this defense? Like, where do you think teams have had success? Like, where do you think your quote unquote weakness is? Is there any, spots on this defense that you think the Ravens could try to target?
Yeah, I would say this is where things get really, really interesting. And let's actually roll into it because we'll talk about the matchups here. And, one of the things that I wanted to bring up was a matchup you're confident in and then a matchup you're concerned about. The matchup I'm concerned about and where I would attack is exactly how the Ravens attack everybody. Run the football. Run the football. The San Francisco 49ers, when it comes to a yards per game perspective, I think are number 2 or number 3. But when it comes to yards per carry, they're 18th defensively in the league. Not a lot of teams have been able to run the ball consistently because they find themselves down very quickly against this offense that seems to score 30 against everybody. So you're forced to pass in those situations. But the run defense has been a question since training camp. And there have been times where it's looked fantastic. And when you look at it from a yards per game perspective, it looks great. Just this last week, though, they gave up over 200 yards rushing to the Arizona Cardinals, who I would say is Baltimore Ravens light. And if they have an injury to Eric Armstead in particular, and he's unable to go, that is a major, major weakness for the 49ers. Now, if he is able to go, the run defense is better, but I don't think that everything is solved because of him. It just gets better because he's in the game. This is where I'm curious to see, can the 49ers consistently stop the run game, because the Ravens are not a team that is going to stop running the football. It's just not going to happen. It's in their DNA. It's who they are. They always lead the league in rushing. It seems like they are going to run the ball all game long and force you to stop it. And I'm curious to see how the 49ers handle it. So that is a matchup that I'm concerned about personally.
Okay. That really surprises me, to be honest, because I don't get to watch the Niners obviously nearly as much as you do. And I'm looking at the stats here. This is why, you can't always just stat watch, but I'm looking at the rushing yards per game, and I saw the Niners were the 3rd overall rush defense with 89.4 and never took into account, never thought about the fact that, Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because they have an explosive offense. They're always up, so teams aren't really running the ball. But you said they're 18th in yards per carry, so that's huge for the Baltimore Ravens. And I think now that you said that, then that makes me think. I wonder if the Ravens could try to employ Lamar a little bit more as a rusher. Some of the quarterback power, the option, the RPO stuff, to really keep the 49ers honest and in that manner with the run game. So that'll be really fun to watch. I did not know that the 49ers run defense was actually an area of concern, from their own fans.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I said, it's something that we talked about very early on in training camp and in the preseason. And it's just kind of always been there. And this last week, the 49ers have had issues with missed tackles this year,
Yeah.
throughout the year as well. They missed like 16 tackles this last week alone. They've had multiple games where they've gone over double digits and missed tackles. And so that's contributing as well. But
Mhm.
that's happened 4 or 5 times this year. And if it's going to happen, you would think it would happen against a power run team, a now new power run team that Mitchell is out. You talked about Ricard,
Yeah.
you talked about Edwards. Obviously, you got Lamar back there. And what the Ravens can do is so unique because you get these sets
Yeah.
where Lamar's in shotgun. He's got two running backs next to him. Then all of a sudden, Zay Flowers is going in motion, who, by the way, he can take jet sweeps and end arounds himself. They
Yeah.
hike the ball, and Lamar's like faking it to Zay. He's handing it off to this running back. He's keeping it. He's giving it to Zay. They really throw a lot of eye candy out there for the defense. And I think that things can get very interesting when it comes to stopping the run this week. So I'm curious to see how it plays out. I really am. Let's ask you the same question, but in reverse.
Yeah.
What is a matchup that you're concerned about? How would you attack the Ravens if you're the San Francisco 49ers, either offensively or defensively? What are you seeing?
So we've had an issue with run defense, kind of how you're talking about, but specifically out of 11 personnel.
Oh,
So whenever teams they get big and they put a lot of tight ends out there, and the Ravens match with their base defense, they're good at stopping the run. They're very
okay.
physical. They got some big boys up front like Michael Pierce and Travis Jones that can throw in there. The linebackers can really shoot and fill their gaps. But whenever teams spread the Baltimore Ravens out, they get an 11 personnel. They've had a consistent issue stopping the run. And that, I mean, I've seen us get gashed for 5, 10 yards consistently whenever teams try to run the ball out of 11 personnel on us. The other thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, there's actually two other things. So if you're a Niners fan, maybe this would be a little bit encouraging to you. But uh, Christian McCaffrey catching the ball as a receiver, there has been times where we've struggled to cover running backs on wheel routes, um, kind of option routes whenever the running backs are coming out of the backfield. The Ravens have a very good pass defense. I mean, among the top of the league in pass defense. But the one area that I would try to attack them is their linebackers. I would try to get, not that Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen aren't good linebackers, but they're run and hit, gap shooting, blitzing linebackers more than they are elite cover linebackers. So I would try to use Christian McCaffrey, the absolute weapon that he is. If I was the Niners, to try to get one-on-ones with Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith, I would like my matchup there if I was a Niners fan. But as a Ravens fan too, I'm also saying like, yeah, I think these linebackers are talented and can maybe slow them down. But I think Christian McCaffrey could have the edge and one-on-ones with a guy like Roquan Smith or Patrick Queen.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. Let's reverse it.
Mhm.
What is a matchup that you're very confident in going into this week for the Baltimore Ravens versus San Francisco 49ers?
Well, the matchup I was most confident before you started talking about Lenore was Zay Flowers versus the number two or the slot corner, whoever's covering Zay Flowers at the time, because I think Odell Beckham will probably draw the number one corner per se. I don't know. Do you guys typically shadow or do you leave your corners left and right defensively?
They've done both. Traditionally, they've kept their corners on a side, but this
Okay.
year, especially when they've played bigger receivers, so I don't know that
Mhm.
it'll happen this week. But when they've gone up against AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, Tarvarius Ward has traveled. So we'll see what they do this week.
Okay. Well, I think in that case, I mean, I'd like to see Zay Flowers. I think that against even some of the better corners in the league that because of how shifty he is and his sudden change of direction ability, that is really it's elite. I mean, he can really stop on a dime and cut and make corners trip all over themselves. I'd like to see us take some shots with Zay Flowers downfield and maybe get him some screens. You're talking about the Niners sometimes missing some tackles. Throw the ball to Zay Flowers and see if they can continually tackle him out in space. So that's one matchup I'd like to see the Baltimore Ravens kind of exploit there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the matchup that I'm most confident in, and now once you get there, this is a whole different story. But I think getting to Lamar may not be the biggest struggle that the 49ers have. I look at those tackles, especially Stanley. I mean, Stanley to
they're
me,
struggling right now.
I don't think he'll be with the Ravens next year. I would be shocked if he's back. He makes a lot of money. He has for a long time been one of the better tackles in the league. He's a shell of himself, at least from what I've seen this year. And he's been injured, different injuries, got the knee thing going, I believe. So
yeah, he's not healthy. He can't anchor right now.
Yeah, and that's a big problem against this defensive line who's got predators up and down the whole thing. So the San Francisco 49ers should be able to win against this offensive line. Now, where things get interesting, as you talked about, is Ricard can help out.
Yeah.
And Lamar Jackson is not the easiest guy to bring down or get your hands on. So he can make anybody look silly. But I think getting to Lamar or getting near Lamar and speeding up his process should be relatively easy this week. Can they actually bring him down? That I don't know because Lamar's he's just a different beast.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it gets dicey. You know, teams are going to be able to, if you're just looking at a traditional drop back passing game, if Lamar Jackson was not elusive or mobile, I'd be really, really concerned about our offensive line and about the 49ers defensive line. That was one of the other matchups I'm nervous about is that I was going to mention Nick Bosa and Chase Young, who, by the way, the Ravens were in the mix for trading for Chase Young. I think he was a great addition by y'all. But those two edge rushers versus our two tackles gets me really nervous. But there's always the elements of from Lamar Jackson where he just is elusive and shifty and plays outside of structure. That's the part where he may have to win this game. If the Ravens are going to travel all the way to the West Coast as 5.5-point underdogs, last time I checked, against the number one seed in the NFC, that would be, you would need Lamar Jackson, I believe, to just be Lamar Jackson and to continually elude pressure, step up in the pocket. You were talking earlier about how Lamar Jackson this year as a scrambler has been really looking downfield. So maybe he can find some big plays downfield with guys like Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers, maybe Odell or Bateman. But I think 100% absolutely. I'm concerned about our tackle play. Ronnie Stanley, he has a knee injury. It's not 100%, and he cannot anchor. Whenever he gets a straight bull rush, and I know Nick Bosa and Chase Young are capable of a nice, strong bull rush, he has a really hard time anchoring. Morgan Moses, he's been solid when healthy, but right now there's kind of a rumor and a concern among the Ravens fan base that he's dealing with an arm injury because he's not extending like he has in recent games. So both of our tackles are banged up. One thing that's been really unique that the Ravens are doing the last couple of games is rotating their tackles. They're actually using their second string left tackle, Patrick McCarry, and their second string right tackle, Daniel Falele, rotating them in and out to try to keep their other veteran tackles fresh. So we'll see what the Ravens try to do here. If they want to try to mix it up. I think one way, like you said, to neutralize the pass rush is keep running the ball downhill and then try to hit some shots off play action.
Yeah, most definitely. And a matchup that I'm nervous about, it's not even a matchup, but I just want to point it out.
Yeah.
The Ravens have the best kicker in NFL history. And if this turns into a field goal shootout or it comes down to a last second field goal, I'm very confident that Tucker can get the job done.
Yeah.
Not so much with Jake Moody, who's a rookie kicker. Jake Moody has not had to kick a ton this year. He's had one opportunity to win a game. He blew that opportunity. And there have been multiple games he's gone without kicking any field goals. So I don't know exactly what to think of him yet. I'm not saying he can't get the job done. But if it turns into one of those games where it's like, hey, everybody keeps getting there, but they can't quite punch it in, I'm going to take the Ravens in that sort of game because I know that one guy is going to come through, and I don't know about the other one. So it's not a matchup, but it is something to look out for. So,
Yeah,
all
that's a
right,
good point.
yeah,
Justin Tucker hasn't been himself this year. He's missed a couple of kicks from over
mhm.
50. He's also had a couple of blocked kicks, so that's something to look out for as well. I do believe the last time the Ravens played the 49ers, though, wasn't it? It was 2019, right? Am I
Yeah, a rain game. Yep.
because I think Justin Tucker hit the game-winning field goal from like 40 or 50 yards plus in the rain.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Justin Tucker's definitely capable of it, but he hasn't been as good as he has been in recent years.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, we got a ton of these super chats, so let's rock through these quickly before we get to our prediction. Brother Bob says this is a Kittle game, Niners 38-24. He then says, "See, Noah's predicting Brock Purdy to beat Lamar Jackson on Monday." Matt says 49ers comment creators 28-21. There we go. I love it. Brother Bob says, Noah, I know all, but what Niners scares you most? I think we
Probably
got our answer
C-Mac.
there. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. How can you not be scared of that? Samir says 49ers comment creators and subscribers 27-24 Niners. Sammy says, seeing Lamar against Detroit, he was fire that day. Yeah, they exposed Detroit. They were the first ones to expose Detroit and Seattle, really. Those were embarrassing. Dave says, Jess, Lamar said himself his arm was stronger in high school. He could throw 100 yards then. Now he says he can throw 80. That was on a Good Morning Football today. So I hope it's a recent statement.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a recent statement. Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. But well, his arm is stronger now than when he entered the league. I can tell you that right now. His velocity is much higher. And that's how
Yeah.
I measure arm strength. A lot of people look at it as far as distance. A lot
Yeah.
of quarterbacks can throw far, but that doesn't necessarily measure arm strength. My thing is when you're looking from far hash to outside the numbers, 20 yards down the field in a tight window, can you get it
Yeah.
there? He can do that now. He's
Yeah. Can you
definitely
really
got
rip it
some
into those
velocity.
outside windows? Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tommy says this game is going to come down to turnovers. Great comment. I am right there with you.
Yeah. That's a good
Keith
point.
says, here's 99 cents. Brother Bob says, Noah,
Appreciate you.
B100. Your corners, not Philly, but they're trash still. What do you think about your corners overall? Do you think the corners are good or no?
I like our corners a lot.
Okay.
Now Marlon Humphrey, there's been a couple of games. So he's returned from 2 injuries this year.
Yeah.
The first time he got torched. He got beat. I think it was George Pickens beat him for the game winner. That was one of our few losses this year. But then got better as he got healthy. And I think it's the same thing here. The first game back against the Rams, Marlon Humphrey did not look the best. And Lamar Jackson actually told him straight up, like, Marlon, you got to play better, bro. And Marlon Humphrey, I mean, he's a former All Pro, continual Pro Bowler. I'm not worried about his talent. I'm not worried about him being over, kind of washed or anything. I think he's only 27 years old. He's
Yeah.
still he's a great corner, but he has dealt with injuries. I think right now he's healthy. And like I already talked about with Brandon Stevens, I love Brandon Stevens. He's a physical corner. He'll get beat now and then, but he battles. He's not afraid to get up and press. He doesn't care who your name is, if it's Jamar Chase, if it's Brandon Ayuk, if it's stinking prime Julio Jones or whatever. Like he'll get up in there and compete with you. So I like Brandon Stevens, and then I love Kyle Hamilton in the nickel.
Yeah.
I love him
Yeah.
as that third DB covering slot guys and tight ends. He's sticky. He's physical. I think our pass defense. Let me look at it real quick because I think our passing. And when it comes to pass defense, we are 7th with only allowing 185 yards per game through the air. The one spot that we've had some struggles at times has been, like I said, run defense out of 11 personnel. But I like our corners. I'm comfortable with them.
Well, you said they're 7th. I'm going to take it a step further, like I did with yards per carry. The Ravens are first in the NFL in yards per attempt as far as a pass defense goes, which again, strength on strength, the 49ers are first in passing offense yards per attempt. So we're going to see what's what. And the 49ers have been able to throw on everybody. the Ravens, nobody can really throw on them for big chunks at a time. So I'm curious to see how that plays out as well.
Yeah.
Keith says, do I start Ayuk over Waddle? I would say this: if Tyreek Hill plays, yes. If Tyreek Hill plays, start Ayuk. If Tyreek Hill doesn't play, I would probably go with Waddle because he's going to get all those targets like he did last week. Ayuk is balling week in and week out, but Waddle's also very, very good. Brother Bob says, BA about to send Stevens back to running back.
Don't do him like that, man.
Buddy. Brother Bob says, watch Warner get a pick 6, and you are already nervous, Noah. Just nonstop. Nee says, why is Lamar 1-3 in the playoffs? Genuine question. This is an interesting number. There's also another interesting number. He's 19-1 against the NFC in the regular season in his career. Obviously doesn't play the NFC in the playoffs unless he gets to a Super Bowl, but 19-1 against the NFC, that's a real number as well. But this is a good question. And I know coming from Nees, it is a genuine question. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I think the last time we got to see Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, it was 2020, because in 2021, 2021 and 2022, he missed the last 5 games of the year and didn't play in the playoffs. So the last time we saw Lamar Jackson, so we had the 2018 playoff game, which he was rookie Lamar Jackson. He got beat by the Chargers in his rookie year. Okay. He only played like the last couple of games of the year. So yeah, that's a loss.
And they made the playoffs because of him. They were not headed towards the playoffs. He came in and changed the direction of the team. Yeah.
And he was absolutely, the Chargers sold out in that game to the run, and the Ravens refused to let him open it up and throw the ball downfield until the end of the game, and they almost mounted a comeback when they finally let him do it. The next year, 2019, the Ravens were 14-2, won 12 straight games. They had, I think what this was, personally, they already had locked up the number 1 seed. And this is something you guys got to think about as 49ers fans, because I know you guys are in a really good position for the number 1 seed. The Ravens, they rested their starters in the last week of the regular season against the Steelers.
Thank you. I was just talking about this. Go. Yes.
So they essentially had 2 bye weeks because they rested their starters the last game of the regular season, and then they had the bye week. And then whenever they played in the divisional round against the Tennessee Titans just punched them in the mouth. The Ravens looked rattled. Derrick Henry did Derrick Henry things. They hit us on some trick plays and play action. The Ravens looked rusty. They had a couple of weird turnovers. And suddenly, the Ravens found themselves losing to the 9-7 Titans, who barely slipped into the playoffs that year. So I think they were rusty. They were caught off guard. They got punched in the mouth. And also, keep in mind, in 2019, the Ravens never played from behind. The Ravens got out, the Titans got out on a lead, had to play from behind, and they got exposed because they didn't really have any receivers. That year, Mark Andrews was the number 1 receiver. So we weren't really built to come from behind like that. Then the next year, you saw Lamar Jackson finally got that first playoff win against the Titans, got his revenge. That was the 1 win. Then the following game got knocked off by the Bills after Lamar Jackson had a concussion, got knocked out of the game early. So the last time we seen the Ravens in the playoffs was 2020, and he did win a game that year. So now you get to see Lamar Jackson. Hopefully, God willing, he stays healthy. The Ravens stay healthy. We get to see him in the playoffs this year with some real weapons, a really strong defense, and I think he's going to change that narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I know this is a genuine question from Nees, but a lot of people look at that and will pick it apart without knowing the facts. Brock Purdy's technically 2-1 in the playoffs, but really he's 2-0. We know that he left that game early with an arm injury. One of Lamar's losses came in a game he really didn't play because of a concussion, and that is a big deal. And then the other one, another loss was when he was a rookie. So, and cautious tale here, by the way, is the 49ers. This is the argument I've been making, Noah, this whole week is the 49ers can't rest in week 18. They've got to play. You can't go into it rusty. You can't have 2 bye weeks. That is not ideal for anybody, in my opinion. So Don says, Noah, love the live stream format. Enjoy the newest baby's first Christmas, brother. Oh, you got a new one over there?
Yep, got a baby girl. She's almost 3 months.
That's awesome,
so
man.
yeah, Yeah. Appreciate you, Don.
That's great. As far as the game, hopefully it's a Super Bowl preview. Yeah, man, I think we would all
Really
welcome
could
that
be.
for sure.
That'd be fun.
Dave says, "Don't give away our secrets, Jess."
I saw him put that whenever you were talking about the run defense. Whenever you
Oh,
exposed,
okay.
man, you enlightened me. I was shocked when you said that the 49ers were 18th in yards per carry. That's really
Yeah,
surprised me.
yeah. Keith says, "I'm going to be honest. I only worry about Josh, Pat, and Lamar beating us. They can put the team on their back." Yeah, elite quarterbacks can do that, man. They definitely can. James says, "Noah, 49ers are seen as front runners. Do the Ravens have any fourth quarter or regular come from behind wins?"
The one I comes off the top of my head here is against the Rams.
Mm,
I think we won in overtime. We were tied up, and Lamar Jackson, I think, yeah, we were actually down, and Lamar Jackson hit Zay Flowers on, I think, a 3rd and 18, hit him on a crossing route in the end zone, and then hit him on the ensuing 2-point conversion as well. So the Ravens are definitely capable from coming from behind. They haven't had to do it much this year, but I think they're capable.
Keith says the Ravens have strong linebackers. How do they match up with CMC? This is a great question from Keith, because when you when you look at teams across the NFL, Shanahan has built a team to exploit the linebacker position, and there aren't
Yeah.
many good linebackers, let alone linebacker duos in the league. The Ravens have that, but they are very different linebackers. Talk to us about them, and who's kind of the cover guy, who's the better run guy. Like what does that look like there between Patrick and Roquan?
Roquan Smith is top 5 in the NFL in tackles. Patrick Queen, I think, is top 10 or 15. He's got over 100 tackles. Both of these guys are solid in run defense. However, Patrick Queen is more of your will linebacker, really good as a blitzer. But they do use these guys interchangeably. I mean, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, this is one of the reasons why the Ravens defense is so fun and has had so much success, is because sometimes they'll blitz one, drop the other. Sometimes they'll blitz both. Sometimes they'll drop both. I do think that Roquan Smith is the better run defender when it comes to shedding blocks, running through blocks. But that's something that Patrick Queen has also improved on with the physicality of his game. They're both good linebackers. But I do think that if you're going to, like we said earlier, if you're going to try to exploit these linebackers, get CMC running routes downfield with these guys. Because these guys want to come down and they want to hit you and they want to be physical. Roquan Smith is literally like a mini Ray Lewis in his mentality of the game. Not saying he's Ray Lewis, but like the fact, like the energy he brings, the tenacious attitude. He wants to punish. He wants to be physical. So he wants to run downhill and hit, and he wants to shoot gaps and have tackles for loss. Patrick Queen's the same way. So if you're going to try to expose these linebackers, you're going to want to try to get these guys covering George Kittle or CMC, running routes downfield.
Yeah, most definitely. Keith follows up and says, "I didn't watch the Rams game, but what did they do to give," I believe he means Baltimore here, trouble? Is it something San Francisco can use? I did watch the game, and here's what I'll say, and I really should have talked about it in the matchups, because it is something else that I'm confident in. Talked
Yeah.
about Brock Purdy. One thing that's great about Brock Purdy is he's playing well beyond being a second year quarterback. I mean, as far as his mentality goes, his smarts, how he sees the field, all of that, his anticipation is out of control. And one
Yes.
thing that Baltimore does a fantastic job of is, quite frankly, they trick quarterbacks. Like, think of what
Yeah.
49er fans, think of what Kyle Shanahan does pre and post snap offensively, all the gadgets, all the movement, all the crazy things that you see. Baltimore is that, but on the defense. They
Yeah.
will trick quarterbacks. You traditionally, when you have a wide receiver go in motion, it's to figure out if it's man or zone. If the corner follows, it's man. If he doesn't, it's zone. The Ravens will have a corner follow and then play man up alignment and then drop into a cover 2 or a cover 6 and just confuse people like crazy. Matthew Stafford's a veteran in this league. He's seen just about everything. And so Matthew Stafford is not going to get confused. Now, maybe they can confuse Brock Purdy, but my money's on Brock Purdy figuring it out. And even though they rotate like crazy pre to post snap, I think Brock Purdy can navigate through that and play pretty well in this game, despite the Ravens being able to trick nearly every quarterback they've played this year outside of Stafford and maybe a couple others.
Yes. Jesse, let me ask you this.
Mhm.
So I was looking at your guys' games, and obviously I didn't get a chance to see all these, but
Mhm.
I did catch some of the plays from the Browns matchup.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at your guys' scores and everything and looking at the defenses you've played. And I'm like, okay, you guys have really like one of the best defenses you played is against the Browns. And I believe, I don't think you were stayed under 20 points on that one.
Mhm.
So what
Yeah.
did the Browns do? Are you concerned because you guys haven't seen a lot of top defenses? Maybe there's some other teams I'm not thinking of, but in
Yeah.
the one game that you did play a really good defense, it didn't look the same. So what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Cowboys are fraudulent as a defense. So I'm not going to throw them into here when the 49ers put up 42 on them. But when I look at the Browns in particular, what the Browns can do is very unique because they have those elite corners. Brock Purdy's been fantastic against the blitz,
Yeah.
but the Browns are unique in the fact that they can get to the quarterback with 4 and
Yeah.
they can play press man across the board because they've got 3 very, very good, really 4 very good corners over there. And it gave the 49ers trouble. Brock
Okay.
Purdy, the biggest thing about his game is anticipation. I think a lot of people will look at his game and say, hey, he doesn't have the biggest arm. And Brock Purdy said this himself. Now, his arm strength, much like Lamar, I think has actually improved since he's coming to the league as well,
Yeah. I've
coming
never
off
seen
that
Purdy
surgery.
have an issue. Like that's not something that I
No,
perceive as an issue. Like I've seen him
no.
have plenty of velocity on balls downfield.
Yeah, it's not an issue per
Yeah.
se. I think it was a concern early on in his career, but or last year he didn't throw the ball downfield a lot, and
Yeah.
a lot of balls did flutter on him. His arm has gotten stronger, in my opinion, but also, I wouldn't. He doesn't have a plus arm though. I can confidently say he doesn't have a plus arm. He has an adequate arm for the league. Okay,
Yeah.
but what that means is he does throw with a ton of anticipation. He expects receivers to be in certain places. And so if you blitz him, then he knows, hey, this is my hot route. This is where I can go. This is
Mhm.
my quick read. If you play zone and you can't get to him, he just throws the spots and he'll pick you apart.
Yeah.
The Cleveland Browns played press man and got home with 4. It was the
Mm.
best of both worlds. And I think that's a unique team, one of the few teams in the NFL that can do that with the
Yes.
talent that they have. And probably the first time that he's actually seen that on the field as a pro. So that's the reason why I think he struggled in that game. On top of the 2 times he's played in a little bit of rain, it's gotten a little squirrely on him. In the first half of that game, it was raining as well. And I think that
Gotcha.
caused him some issues. So when you look at Baltimore, I know that they can do it all and they are very confusing. Is that a game plan you think they can deploy? Can they get home with 4? Which I know and Abike is phenomenal. You got some good pass rushers there, but can they get home consistently with 4? And can they play press man? Because if they can, I think that it will be interesting to see how Brock Purdy deals with that the second time around.
I think that's a really good question. The Ravens, I don't think the Ravens prefer to be in zone from what I've
Mhm.
seen. And they prefer to do a lot of the simulated blitzes, like you were talking about, confusing guys and everything. But there has been times where the Ravens have comfortably, consistently gotten home with 4. Sometimes it feels, I don't know if you ever feel like this way. Do you ever feel like your team just has a hot pass rush day where they're just
Mhm.
constantly in the
Oh, yeah.
backfield, or
Yes.
sometimes you're just like, man, why does this guy have all day to throw? The Ravens have been a little bit hot and cold with their 4-man rush, but one thing I will say, I don't know how the interior of your offensive line is. I know you have a really good left tackle, Trent Williams, but Justin Madubuike, like you were saying, like he's the real deal. This is a guy that before this season wasn't necessarily a household name, but every single year he's been in the league, he's doubled his sacks. He's already at 12 this year, which is really hard to do from the interior defensive line. He's really explosive, and he has a lot of success, rushing from the interior. Odafe Owe, since he's come back from injury, he hasn't always gotten the sacks, but he's disruptive. He's super athletic. He can bend. He's got power. And then Jadeveon Clowney, I don't know what happened when he came to Baltimore, but man, this guy looks like he's playing in a different gear right now. He said that his goal heading into the season was to play every single game. He's dealt with injuries throughout his career, but this year he's been healthy and
He's a
he's playing
lot
really
lighter.
good.
He looks a lot fat. Maybe it's the uniform.
Yeah.
Sometimes when players change uniforms, they look bigger or smaller. He looks a good 20 pounds lighter. He looks like a
Yeah.
completely different player.
Yeah. But to answer your question, I think the Ravens definitely have the secondary to go press man. They can press with Marlon. Marlon's a good press corner. Brandon's really physical. Brandon Stevens, he likes to play press. And then as far as, I mean, that could really come down to it. We can cover, but how long can we cover? You know, can that 4-man rush get home? Kyle Van Noy has been kind of underrated this year as well. He's gotten after the quarterback a couple of times, gotten, I think, 6.5 sacks this year. So Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Madubuike, Michael Pierce, those guys can get after the quarterback with a 4-man rush. But like you said, the Ravens don't necessarily love to live there. They love to blitz. They love to, do different things and kind of press the issue. That's what it'll be really fun to watch. How much does Mike McDonald, the second-year defensive coordinator, press the issue and just say, man, because he has a mentality that he wants to attack. He wants to dictate. He wants the offense to react versus being reactive as a defense. So it'd be really interesting to see.
Well, I will say another time that we saw Brock Purdy have a little bit of trouble was against Minnesota. Now, a lot of people will say it was because he got the concussion, and maybe that's the case. But what they did schematically was they're a heavy blitz team, and they blitzed and blitzed and blitzed. And then at the end of the game, after they had blitzed repeatedly, and Brock Purdy had expected that to come and played pretty well against it, as he usually does, they started bailing out. And he wasn't expecting it, and it confused him a couple times late in that game. So, sometimes going against what film shows and what you've been showing all game can confuse things as well. And I don't know if there's anybody better than Baltimore at kind of confusing and making things happen and having a smoke and mirrors type of aspect of their game. So,
yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's one thing the Ravens will do is show different looks to Brock. I mean, that's for sure. They'll give him some different looks and see what kind of works and what doesn't. That's what Baltimore does.
Yeah. Ben Metal says Baltimore fans are more respectful and reasonable than Philly fans. Yes, they are. Joey Millen says, I thought you're behind enemy lines.
Wild.
I thought behind enemy lines was with your son this week. It's a double dose. In fact, when we had Philly week, big games, Philly week, we had 2 behind enemy lines. This week's the same. My son was on Monday, and now I've got Noah here.
Yeah, so let me tell all my guys real quick.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
After we finish this live, I'll put in the description the link for Jesse's channel here and the video of him interviewing his son, because this was amazing. I went and watched it, and if you're just now joining the stream, Jesse's son, he's 9 years old.
Yes. Yep.
So he's a Ravens fan. And he became a Ravens fan through Madden, and he loves him some Baltimore Ravens. And he's excited. He said he's more excited for the Ravens and Niners game than he is Christmas from Santa. So you guys got to go watch that interview because it was some good stuff. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, he's I was actually surprised because we didn't do any prep. I was like, I want it to be as natural as possible. So when I asked him that question, man, I was so shocked at his answer. I was like, really? Okay, this is great.
Yeah, my oldest is only 3. Yeah. So I can't wait till he hopefully he doesn't like pick another team. That would kind of hurt me a little bit, but
I would have never expected it, man. I really thought, that it was going to be a Niner thing, and it just wasn't, man. It wasn't meant to be. Keith Murphy says, how does Purdy have more playoff wins than Lamar? I think, actually, this is a little bit old. We answered that question as far as some of those games in Baltimore. Brother Bob says, we're about to expose the Ravens like we did the Eagles on primetime. We'll see. Samir says, Noah, do you buy into the Super Bowl color conspiracy? Have you heard this, Noah? This is a good one if you haven't.
I don't think so. Are we talking about the light show in 2012? The lights going out? Okay.
No, so
about it.
It's like the last 5 years or something like that. The colors of the Super Bowl logo has predicted the 2 teams that have that are going to play in the Super Bowl. And this year, the colors of the Super Bowl logo are purple and red. So everybody says it's the 49er
Oh,
Ravens Super Bowl.
I love it. Or it could be like Vikings and
Yeah.
I don't know. Who's a
Chiefs.
Chiefs?
Ugh,
Yeah. I
gross.
don't know.
I
But
hope not.
that's funny. I was talking to my wife earlier. She asked me something about do you think the NFL could be scripted? And she made a good point. She was like, I literally saw a player stop breathing on an NFL football field. Remember that whole Hamlin situation?
Yeah. Oh,
She's
yeah.
like, "How would they have scripted that?" I'm like, "That's a good point." Like we're talking about guys breaking their legs and stuff in the middle. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. And you can see the live reactions on the sidelines and some of these guys, like real tears and heartbreak and stuff like that. So anytime someone ever brings up like, "Can the NFL be scripted?" I'm like, man,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about the scripted thing. I definitely think that sometimes it does seem like there might be an agenda from the refs,
yeah,
and
I could
I
see
think a
that.
lot of that is fans. But when I watch games that I have no bias in, I could care less who wins, and I'm just watching football to watch football. Sometimes, like,
Yeah,
God, that sure was pretty sketchy, man. Like, I don't know
yeah.
how you make those calls, but I don't know.
Sometimes when the ref just randomly walks up and moves the spot after it was
Yeah,
like, just
what is
moves the
going
ball
on?
like a whole foot or forward or back, like,
Like, what? Brocktavius, member for 3 months. What's up, Brocktavius? He and I had a little back and forth today on one of my videos. I hope you don't take the tone out of context. You and I had a really good back and forth. It's all love for me, man. I appreciate you rocking with the channel, but definitely had to defend my opinion on what we were discussing there. But he says, has the departure of Greg Roman helped the Ravens? This is a great question. Greg Roman was here in San Francisco with Kaepernick, then went over there and I think helped develop Lamar. But there's a certain point where Greg Roman is no longer needed when it comes to mobile quarterbacks and can only take them so far. I
yeah.
think it's a welcome addition that Monken is there. But what do you guys think as Ravens fans?
Yes, I think that it was time to take the training wheels off, and I think it
Yeah,
was time to get Lamar Jackson and a more comprehensive downfield passing attack where he's able to make checks at the line of scrimmage. He's able to read defenses. He's able to, go through his progressions a little bit more complex than some of the route trees that Greg Roman was implementing. Some of the stuff, Lamar Jackson has openly said, like, Todd Monken has truly given me the keys to the offense. And he allows my input and I show him plays that I like. And in fact, this last week they had a headset issue, and Lamar Jackson was basically just calling his own plays. And but I think he's taken that next step as a quarterback mentally. Earlier in training camp, Todd Monken took away the wristband and was like, "No, you're going to memorize all these," and then eventually let him have it back. There's that whole conversation about whether or not quarterbacks should have wristbands. Does Brock Purdy have one?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but I think definitely it was time. Greg Roman did some great things. He's a mastermind in the run game, but I feel like you can only go so far in the NFL nowadays with a dominant run game. Like, you have to be able to throw the ball downfield sometimes. Even if it's just one game in a playoff run and you just run over everyone else, there's going to be a time where you have to hit an explosive play downfield, convert on third down or something where you need more of a comprehensive passing attack. And I think Lamar Jackson has really benefited from the change in coordinator with Todd Monken in that.
I also like the way that he acclimated Lamar to the offense. You talked about the wristband thing, but just which I didn't know about, and that's a great tidbit. But watching the Ravens early on in the season versus late, it's almost as if he and Lamar had an agreement, like, "Hey, bud, you're not going to run the ball the first few weeks of the season. That's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. You're going to throw the ball. You're going to get acclimated to this passing game, and then as the season wears on, we'll deploy you more and more and more." And that's what you've seen from the Ravens. It's really as the season has progressed, you're starting to see Lamar turn into Lamar with the legs, but he forced him to pass the ball. At least that's the way it looked or played out on the field. And I think that in the season, there was some lumps early on, but I think those early lumps and even potential losses or loss to teams like the Colts were worth it for the long run success of this offense between those two.
Yeah, that's a good point. Shout out to Engraven in the chat. we were just talking about Engraven earlier.
We were. Yeah. Is he here,
Yeah,
let's see where
he's in my chat in here, and it reminded me because you said about how you thought that Todd Monken was kind of like telling Lamar like you ain't running. He was telling me the other day that he thinks that they were holding a little something back for the playoffs, saving some stuff as far as quarterback run scheme and letting Lamar Jackson just rip it off those big runs. So that made me think of that. Shout out to Engraven.
Yeah, shout out to you, Engraven. I was telling the behind the scenes of when I reached out to you and the kind words that you had said about Noah. I had told them that before we went live. So you're a real one, man. You're really, really nice guy,
Engraven's
and
first
hopefully we
class,
can
man.
link
Shout
up
out to
too.
Engraven.
Yeah, absolutely. Sammy and Pickle says Ravens get the lead. We will turn the lights off. Nice.
Run it back, man. Run it back.
Brother Bob says, Noah, will you man up and pay this bet you're losing on Christmas? You haven't even made him an offer. I haven't seen a bet come through,
Hey,
Brother
man,
Bob.
I was telling Jesse, I coached flag football, and my last team that I coached was the 49ers. So I have a 49ers shirt. If the Ravens lose, I'll gladly wear my 49ers shirts on one of the next videos that I post. So there we go.
There you go. I love it. Josh says, don't forget that we lost Debo and CMC in the first quarter against the Browns. Yeah, Debo ended up being out. I'm trying to remember. CMC, I thought, played pretty much the rest of the game, and there was some questions on whether he would play the next week. He did miss a little bit of time, but Trent Williams got banged up as well, but did finish that game and then missed the next couple. So there were some injuries for sure. There definitely was. Cryptic says, why are the Niners the favorites? The Ravens have the better QB, better defense statistically. Is the Niners offense that much better? Browns had the number one defense during week 6, and Brock Purdy had issues. I think travel, I think injuries. I think the 49ers are, frankly, the hottest team in the NFL right now. They look the most impressive.
Yeah.
And I think all
some
three of
teams
those
out.
things factor in. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is hard to travel all the way across the
Yes.
country and play in an away, your not home stadium on Christmas. You got to wonder, our kids or guys thinking about their kids back home, and you're talking about the 49ers, how hot they've been recently. But it does make a good point, like we said earlier in the stream. Ravens with the number one overall defense, 49ers second. And then when it comes to offense, we're talking about the third with the Ravens, or the Niners, and then the fourth with the Ravens. So they're neck and neck. This is a great heavyweight battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave says, Noah, thank you for doing the Behind Enemy Lines show. It's awesome. I agree, man. I've had a lot of really good guests this year. This one right here is Ingrid. You were not lying, man. He is class act, top of the top. I'm glad that I was able to get him on. Steve says, if the script color thing is real, it's the Niners' turn. So if we get that Super Bowl rematch, it's our turn. That's fair. That's fair.
That's funny.
He then says, where are you with the Mendenhall white team versus black team? Just kidding. Yeah, that whole thing was bizarre as hell. But people are having fun with it, man. People are having fun with it. That one
cracks me up, man.
Last one here, and then we'll get to our predictions and buzz out of here, man. Samir says, Noah, given a hypothetical power, which Niners defensive player would you take out of the game, and vice versa, Jesse? Oh, this one's easy. I'm taking Hamilton out the game. If I can take him out, Hamilton would be gone. I feel much better about our chances. Samir, great question, brother. Great question.
That's tough for me, because my initial thought is Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
Because he can really wreck shop, give the offensive line some issues. But then I also think our offensive line is probably going to have issues regardless, even if just Chase Young was in there. So then I think about Fred Warner, all the things he can do. And I think we could, if Fred Warner wasn't in there, I would like to see us really get to tight ends involved, because I know Warner can cover tight ends, right?
Like he can cover receivers up seams. He's incredible, man.
Yeah,
he's incredible. So he's a different beast when it comes to coverage for sure. All right, Noah, here it is, man. An hour and a half. I told you I'd get this done in under an hour. I have failed, my friend,
No,
very
it's okay. We're
miserably
having
here.
fun. We're having fun.
But we are here. We've made it. It's prediction time. Who wins this game and how do they get it done? What is your final score prediction on Christmas night, brother?
Man, it's going to be tough. I think the Niners are a really good football team, but I can't pick against my Baltimore Ravens. I can't pick
That's fair.
against them. I think Lamar Jackson is capable of just taking over a game. And I think he might have to do that, but I know he's capable. I've seen him do it time in and time out. The Baltimore Ravens on the road this year have the NFL's best record, 6-1 on the road. On the road, their defense has only allowed 14.4 points per game and 270 yards per game. I have the Baltimore Ravens getting a big Christmas win, 24-21. I think this. I don't know, man. You had me thinking a little bit because you're talking about how it could just kind of go off offensively and we could see some big plays and stuff. But I also think, man, these are two really good defenses that we could see maybe a lower scoring affair. So I got the Ravens winning 24-21.
I like it. I got to be honest with you, Noah. Coming into the season, you go through the schedule, you make your predictions. During the preseason, when I was making those predictions, I had the 49ers losing on Christmas night. And I remember distinctly saying, it's going to be a sad night for 49er fans, but don't worry, we'll be fine. We'll be in the playoffs. Things will turn around. But Christmas night, I think we're going to be disappointed. I don't believe that right now. And a lot of that has to do with the injury to Mitchell. I know he's only one guy, but I really think that
it's a
he
big
had
loss.
brought something dynamic to this offense that it quite frankly is going to miss without him. With no Andrews, I think long term, if Andrews does come back, having likely play will be a long-term win. But right now in the moment, it's certainly a loss.
Yeah.
I think the 49ers find a way to get this one done. They're the home team. They're the hotter team. And really what's interesting about this one, Noah, is you've got two teams fighting for the number one seed in their respective conferences. But the way things are playing out, and because they are in opposite conferences, both of these teams can actually afford to lose because the 49ers, even if they lose, still have the number one seed. And as long as the Ravens beat the Dolphins next week, if they lose this game, they'll have the number one seed. So both of these teams, this isn't dire, must have it game for either one of them. Not that they're not going to try, but that is an interesting dynamic that neither one of them have to have this one.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Teams. Yeah.
So it especially helps that they're not in the same conference, like you said, when it comes down to playoff seeding and tiebreakers and everything. I think if anything, man, this is just going to be like a test of pride. Like both of these teams are looking across from each other and saying, "Oh, like you're the measuring stick in your conference," and then it's like the Spider-Man meme, right?
Yeah.
And then the other team's like, "Well, you're the measuring stick in your conference, two number one seeds." Talking about literally the entire world is watching this on Christmas night, Monday Night Football, two number one seeds, all the things that are going into it. And I think it's going to be just a big pride, proving to themselves that they can beat the best team in the opposite conference. So I think it's going to be a knockout, drag out fight, man.
It's going to be a litmus test for both teams for sure. We're going to know where they both stand. That being said, very similar score to what you had, actually, Noah. I'm going 24-20. 49ers get this one done in a close game. I'm looking so forward to this, man. Noah, dude, awesome show. Let me get through these final two super chats. We'll round it out and finish this thing up. Brother Bob says, "Yeah, Noah, you're not you're not a bitch like the Philly fans are, or Philly X chump." All right. Blake says Greenlaw and Warner are gonna feast. Man, I hope so. And I could see that happening for sure. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for tapping in. Everybody from Noah's channel, appreciate you. I'm gonna say the same thing that I always say, and if it's not in there, I will do it right after. I will put Noah's channel in the description. Whether you are a 49er fan or not, if you are on this channel, we just got an hour and 40 minutes from Noah. Please be respectful. Go sub to his channel. Show him love. He's doing fantastic things over there. And if nothing else, it is to get smarter about maybe a future opponent in the Super Bowl and and talk a little bit of trash and all fun after the game is over. So go subscribe to his channel. Check him out. I'll put the link in the description as soon as this thing is done, if it's not there already. Noah, you've been fantastic tonight. Couldn't have asked for a better guest. Thank you so much. Good luck to your Ravens on Christmas. Not too much good luck, but thank you so much for joining me, man. I really do appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Jesse, man. And all the people that are watching on my side of things as well, make sure to go check out Jesse's channel, man. Excellent stuff. I'll make sure to leave it in the show notes in the description. So I really appreciate you reaching out to me and making this happen, you know, coordinating everything, coordinating the show. I love the formatting you have on your show and everything. It's phenomenal. So I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. A couple last ones here. Dave says 35-21 Niners, and brother Bob says, I like you, Noah. So I feel bad that we're about to stop. Nice, brother Bob.
Good, man.
Nice. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Stay blessed. Noah, thank you. Peace.